quite a big burly guy with a big beard. He spanned round basically and then cocked his AK-47 in our faces. Now that was a bit of a shock to us because as any military guy will tell you, if you're on the front line, you should have a bullet already in your weapon, if that makes sense, a round already. So we started laughing, purely because of the unprofessionalism. Basically, I was a military brat, as they call it. My father was in the army, so I went to 14 different schools, predominantly UK and Germany. Grew up with a football under my arm, played for all the schools that I went to. Finished schooling, my mother and father divorced while I was in Germany. Came back to Lincolnshire. The headmaster got me a trial with Lincoln City, a small team. Never got picked, and to be honest, I was gutted because that's all I ever wanted to do, was play football. So it was then a big choice of what to do: farmer, bricklayer, mechanic. Didn't interest me. A lot of RAF people walking around, absolutely zero interest in joining the Royal Air Force. So the inspiration for me joining the military was actually walking into Grimsby recruiting centre, and there was a big burly paratrooper sat behind a desk, and behind him was a massive picture of people jumping out of an aeroplane, and that was it. I was hooked. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So at the age of 16, I headed off down to Aldershot, Browning Barracks, to join the Junior Parachute Regiment in September 1975. Fantastic. Found P Company itself quite hard, purely because I was really thin, skinny rake of a lad. Managed to get through it and pass it. 4 weeks later, we were ready to go to Wales to do quite a big exercise. But we went for a 10-mile run beforehand, and I, jumping off a tank burn, I snapped my ankle quite badly. So took me back to the camp, then took me up to a place called Cambridge Military Hospital. They manipulated the ankle into place. Left it for 2 weeks, re-x-rayed it, and realised that it hadn't knitted properly, so pinned it. 6 months later, I got called in to the training major, who was in charge of all the training, and there was an officer, a doctor in there, who advised that I couldn't parachute because of the pin in my ankle. And they said, "Oh, have you thought about being a commando?" Because at the time there was 2 army commando units. So because my father was attached to the artillery in Germany, I just thought, I'll join the Royal Artillery. So we went to Northern Ireland first of all, was our very first tour. Basically did South Armagh. No major issues. 2 years after that, the Falklands came up.
Post-Falklands, you moved into the SAS. What drove you to do that?
So I was in Kenya, and we did a jungle exercise, and the 2 instructors were SAS. Didn't like using rank. It was all first name terms. Both had beards, quite scruffy, chilled out, and I just thought, yeah, that's for me. Now, when I was on the commando course, I actually seen the Iranian embassy, and that's the first time I'd actually heard of the SAS. So it was always in the back of my mind, if that makes sense. So from the Falklands onwards, I always had an inkling that that's roughly where I wanted to go. It got to the point in 2-9 Commando where we could plan our year 2 years in advance. And I just thought, I want to go back to Northern Ireland because I'd done Northern Ireland with 2-9 and so I volunteered to do 14 undercover work with the debt, if that makes sense.
Can you explain to me what was your objective out there as an undercover SAS?
There's a big myth that everyone thinks that the SAS are always after the Catholics, the IRA. That's not the case. A lot of our successes that we had were against Protestant gangs as well. So basically, if you was a bad guy and you were planning something, you were going to be dealt with, if that makes sense. So it was all about doing surveillance routine, so getting a routine off a known target, a known terrorist person to find out what he was doing. Sometimes you would get intelligence come through to say that they were planning a job, and if that was the case, then you would work on that intel, that intelligence. The way I sort of went about the undercover, grew my hair quite long, big gold earring, cut off jeans, lots of bits of wood in my car. Sometimes I would get out with a chippy belt on, carpenter's belt, if that makes sense, and your pistol sort of stashed underneath.
So your cover was as a carpenter?
Yeah, that was my sort of reason for being there, if that makes sense. So sometimes I would jump out, maybe with a hard hat on, with a clipboard or whatever, just to do the surveillance. If people looked in your car, they would see all the bits of wood and that actually hid all the stuff that you were normally carrying, and that's how you went about your business. You had a bit of body armour in the back of the driver's seat. And in the door panel, and that was it. Apart from that, it was like a normal car.
So in your cover, as a chippy, did you carry a Northern Irish accent?
Right. So a lot of the debt people, geeks as we call them, they suggested trying to talk with a Belfast accent. Call me old-fashioned, but if you talk with a Belfast accent to a Belfast local, he's going to suss you out straight away. So I spoke with my normal posh English voice. A lot of the Irish people, they're more concerned about, especially the area that we work, they were more concerned that it was a Protestant in a Catholic area or a Catholic in a Protestant area, because these two organisations hated each other with a vengeance. And in the Shankill at the time, and the Ardoyne, they were at each other's throats all the time. So as soon as you came up and went, yeah, and effing and blinding and this, that and the other, you could see a bit of relief. The other thing that I did also is probably against the book, but if somebody was staring at me from across the street, I would actually confront them. I would actually go towards them and say, what's the issue like, Because if they have got suspicions about you, and you decide to put your head down and scuttle away, you've just confirmed exactly what they're feeling. So my mentality was, let's turn this around now. Let's go for them. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And if it doesn't work, what's the biggest risk?
Yeah, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Again, not a drama. Yeah, you just got to extract yourself away from there. And again, having that get out of jail card just gives you a bit more confidence and deal with it. I've never actually had to pull it to threaten someone to get myself out of a situation. But you just know when you're walking away, you just know by the body language that they think there's something up. And then it's down to my honesty to then go back and say, listen guys, I confronted a couple of people. I think I've blown. If you get blown in Northern Ireland, because people suspect you're not a chippy, you're something else, you have to own up to that. The thing that surveillance taught me is if you pretend that I'm really good at something, and so nobody noticed me, you can actually put people's lives at risk. So the next guy who actually goes over to that position that you were the day before could actually get whacked by the IRA or another terrorist organisation. There's always a fear that you're going to be snatched off the street. And as you probably are aware, we had the two signals guys who were snatched in the Ardoyne, so snatched out of a vehicle. They actually managed to pull off, fired one round. They then got overrun, basically. I mean, that is so sad for them individuals. They got killed, but everything went against them. One, because they shouldn't have been there, and two, nobody realised that they were there. So everything went against them. What it did for us in our training, every time you were on the streets, you always knew that you weren't going to put yourself in that position. So you were going to be shooting before it came anywhere near that. So what you do is you draw a sort of bit of a line in the sand, really. But if somebody is being the instigator, you just drill in first and put him on the back foot, if that makes sense, and then continue. We were lucky enough to have quite a few successes within the 18 months that we were out there. And a lot of that is because of the intel that was coming through. The two prominent ones that I dealt with, I suppose, which is why I got awarded the award that I got given, was the IRA were planning to bomb two police stations, Tennyson Road, which is in the Shankill, and the Antrim Road, which is in the Catholic side of it. And we managed to stop both of the attacks. And really, that really just summed up our 18-month tour. We had success after success after success.
It sounds like a pretty terrifying place to be at that point. Were you ever scared?
No, I wouldn't say scared. Apprehensive. On every job you do, you're apprehensive. But I volunteered for this. You know, it's a bit like SAS training. You know, everything I've done and it's all been, I wanted to do it, and that's different. And that puts you in a slightly different mindset.
After Northern Ireland, you went to Bosnia. Can you tell me what you were up to there?
We were there really to just to monitor 5 Corps and the Serbian positions around there. After about 4 weeks of being there, we then got tasked to set up a meeting between Dodakovic and a Serbian general. And what it was the meeting was all about troop movements. Wasn't anything special, you know, wasn't going to determine the outcome of the war. It was just to determine where their people were. So there was 4 of us at the time, myself, Billy, and 2 other lads. So the day before the meeting, me and Billy had gone down there to recce the area, make sure we were happy with it. Spoke to the Serbian troops that were on the front line. Said, listen, we'll see you tomorrow. Got down to the Serb front line and then realised, I suppose, that the situation had slightly changed from the day before. Because they brought the general up, their military people were slightly changed. So we never counted for that. I should have realised it. We didn't. They then took us prisoner. We were surrounded by about 8 Serbs, AK-47s. We just had pistols. So they then put us in a vehicle and drove us 40 minutes back down there behind the lines to a place called Prijedor, which was good for us because we could see all the tank movement and all the troop movement. So we were registering that in our head. Me and Billy whispering to each other on the back seat of the vehicle. And then all of a sudden, the guy who was driving, who was a major, leant over, said something to this guy who was in the passenger seat. Quite a big burly guy with a big beard. He span round basically and then cocked his AK-47 in our faces. Now that was a bit of a shock to us because as any military guy will tell you, if you're on the front line, you should have a bullet already in your weapon, if that makes sense, a round already. So we started laughing, purely because of the unprofessionalism. He obviously took it the wrong way because he gave me quite a hard time later on. But it was, the point being is, you know, military humour is quite dark at times. And even though you're probably in a precarious position, you always try and look at the bright side.
So at the moment of being captured, what's the first thought going through your head?
What, being captured?
Yeah.
Shit. Yeah, this is a bit unexpected, but, you know, it's all about now of making sure that we don't tell them who we actually are, and that's the main thing. You know, we were classed as a Joint Commission observer for the UN. That was our cover story. My cover story itself was I'm just a driver, and I know nothing. I got a bit of a few kicks, a few threats, a few digs in the side with an AK. The guy that we'd laughed at obviously was a bit peeved off, especially with his knife. So I was trying to threaten you and all that lot. But stuff, intimidation stuff that you would normally expect. So again, wasn't a drama. Billy got dragged in 4 or 5 times. I never got dragged in again. Finally, we got put together and we managed to talk to each other. And Billy sort of leant over and said, Mick, what did you tell them? Sorry, mate, I just said I'm the driver. Billy then said, yeah, but I'm a driver. And again, it's that military humour where, sorry, mate, snooze, you lose. I managed to get it in there first. The way they got us released was that the other two lads realised we'd been captured. General down in Sarajevo said, listen, not a drama. Go in and arrest the Serb general, which would have caused a major UN incident, but threaten him with arrest. He then made the call back to Prijedor, got us released. About an hour later, we were walking back and we just thought, it's not a major drama. We do some ballsy stuff over in Bosnia. Being captured, you expect that at some stage. You expect either to be shot or to be captured at minimum.
And the guy with the AK-47, did you ever see him again?
It's funny you should say that. So the interrogator, when UN became NATO, we were based in Prijedor, so the same place that we were interrogated. And the Serbs said, yep, we're going to send a major down there, liaison officer, to work with. So we pulled up in a vehicle. This Serb guy pulled up in a vehicle. He jumped out. Me and Billy jumped out. Realised it was the major that had interrogated us. He absolutely pooped his pants, jumped in the vehicle, never saw him again.
You're someone who's wanted to jump out of planes for a living. Have you always been chasing excitement?
Yeah, it's. I think it's just having that adrenaline rush. You know, I've done quite a few parachute jumps and that lot. And again, jumping is not a drama. You know, just jumping out of a plane is just because again, if you volunteer to do that, then parachuting is part and parcel of the job as well. It's a bit like a milkman, I suppose, in a sort of weird way. I admire milkmen in the old days, going around and putting the milk down, fantastic. Volunteered for that job. A bit like the SAS, we volunteer, it's a job, you volunteer to do it. Okay, some things happen, but you expect that, expect to, same as a milkman would expect to be stuck in traffic. We expect a few dramas to happen on the way.
I love the idea of a milkman saying, "Oh, I'm just like the SAS."
But ultimately, it's a job that you volunteer to do, if that makes sense. So if I, same as a footballer, don't come whinging to me when you're getting paid that amount of money. Same as SAS guys are not going to whinge that they haven't got the right equipment to do a job. They're just going to go and do it. And the question always comes up, who is the best? And without a shadow of doubt, and I've actually explained this to the Americans, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, SAS and the SPS, by far the best. And the reason being, diversity of job. You can pull that guy out, do that job, do that, Americans are quite jealous of that. They don't do the anti-terrorist team, for instance. They're not on active. Some of the stuff that we do, they don't do, if that makes sense. SEAL Team 6, Bin Laden, These are matlows. These are Navy guys, first and foremost. Same as I rate Delta Force much higher than SEAL Team 6. Why? Because they're like the SAS. They are soldiers first and foremost, before they even think about being a SAS soldier.
What have you learned about people in general from working undercover?
Never judge a book by its cover, if that makes sense. And, I've met some fantastic people. I've met some incredible soldiers that have failed SAS selection. I class myself as being really, really lucky to get through SAS selection. Everyone's different. Nobody's going to react the same way. But it's for me, it's just staying humble, so what, you SAS, bit of work, been shot at, blah, 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 part and parcel of the job. Nothing special at all, like.
Could be worse, could be a milkman.
Absolutely, stuck in traffic, stuck in London traffic. I couldn't think I would rather be tortured by Serbs and hung up to dry than driving through that traffic every day, believe you me.
And you got the pintle mount on the bottom and the little T&E.
Yeah.
And he's behind the sights and he's just clicking the T&E. Click, 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 like he's dialing in on something. And it made the hairs like on the back of my neck stand up, like, man, it's about to go down.